Hi, this is Mrs. Schwartz, and today we're going to talk about comparing media. If you remember, we've talked a little bit about this before. We're visiting it again. We're calling this a spiral review. We're looking at information that comes from the internet, an app, or maybe a video website in order to analyze the information so we can figure out how the words are best for explaining a topic. So if I have a guiding question, I should be able to do a Google search for information, get some information back, and look at these different articles or videos or information and determine the impact of that information and be able to determine which one is best for a topic that I may be researching. Okay, for example, my science teacher wants me to do an article about climate change, and she wants me to be able to discuss it as an issue that's something that needs to be addressed immediately. So climate change needs to be addressed immediately, something like that. I type into Google, and maybe I'll get some search results. And in one of my search results, one of the top one is this article called "It's Not Easy Being Green." And it's in a newspaper, New York Times, which is pretty credible. So I think, okay, this might be a good article to read about climate change. And of course, when we talk about green, we're not talking about the color green, but it's this idea that the energy is good for the planet. That's what going green means. So it's the kind of power that we want that is clean power. It's not going to pollute the planet or make the planet worse. So I look at this article, and I'm looking at the picture, and I see that there look like some solar panels, and I see like a smokestack or something. And I see it's way off in the distance, far away from people. Remember, my guiding question is which media best shows that climate change needs to be addressed immediately? Well, I don't want nuclear power plants, and I don't want to pollute the planet. Solar powers look good. This might be a good article to read. It's talking about it's not easy to go green, but maybe it's something that's really important. So we look at the article and see what information is going to be in this article. Let me make this small screen. All right, so here is the article. It says green jobs have long had a whiff of exaggeration to them. The alternative energy sector may ultimately employ millions of people, but raising the cost of energy that households and businesses use every day, a necessary effect of helping the climate, is not exactly a recipe for an economic boom. So I'm looking at this picture, I'm hearing that it's not easy, and now I'm reading that it's not good for the economy. Doesn't give me an idea that this is something that has to be taken care of right away. So let me go to my video top result research from Google, and I get this trailer from An Inconvenient Truth. So let's listen. Oh my, already it will shock you to the core. Lightning blasts, palm trees going crazy. Now I have a picture of a dam exploding. If you love your planet, if you love your children, you have to see this film.
If you look at the 10 hottest years ever measured, they've all occurred in the last 14 years. And the hottest of all was 2005. The scientific consensus is that we are causing global warming.
All right, so far I'm getting this idea that I have to watch this. Terrible things have happened in the last decade since this movie came out, and I better listen for more. So already I'm getting this idea that something needs to be addressed. Let's go back to that article. Let's see. The stronger argument for a major government response to climate change is more obvious. Climate change. The continental United States endured its hottest year on record in 2012. Oh, well, the video was talking about how hot the temperatures were. It says major storms and wildfires are increasing. The air in much of China resembles soup. The air looks like soup? That's amazing. The seas are rising faster than forecast in only a few years. In Washington, the economic case for responding to climate change has made little progress. Oh, that gets the idea that not a lot is happening. Democrats failing to pass a sweeping bill controlled by Congress and Republicans remaining opposed. President Obama has slightly shifted. This is a bit older article because our president isn't Obama anymore. Has subtly shifted his approach, talking less about green jobs and more about extreme weather. Well, I saw a lot about extreme weather in that video. He prepares to deliver the first State of the Union address of his second term on Tuesday night, and he and his advisors face some big decisions on climate policy change. One is to make the biggest dent in carbon emissions through executive branch actions, given the long odds of Congress passing any substantial bill. Okay, so this does talk about the urgency to change it, but it's not happening very quickly, and the president has to take matters into his own hands. Congress is not acting. Okay, let's go back to our video where we left off. Let's see.
The scientific consensus is that we are causing global warming. I am Al Gore. I used to be the next president of the United States of America. This is Patagonia 75 years ago and the same glacier today. This is Mount Kilimanjaro 30 years ago and last year. Within the decade, there will be no more snows of Kilimanjaro. This is really not a political issue so much as a moral issue. Temperature increases are taking place all over the world, and that's causing stronger storms.
Biggest crisis in the history of this country.
Early this morning, Hurricane Katrina slammed into New Orleans.
Is it possible that we should prepare against other threats besides terrorists?
From Paramount Classics comes a film that has shocked audiences everywhere they've seen it.
The Arctic is experiencing faster melting. If this were to go, sea level worldwide would go up 20 feet. This is what would happen in Florida. Around Shanghai, home to 40 million people. The area around Calcutta, 60 million. Here's Manhattan. The World Trade Center Memorial would be underwater. Think of the impact of a couple 100,000 refugees, and then imagine 100 million. We have to act together to solve this global crisis. Our ability to live is what is at stake.
Okay, so I think I have enough information. If my guiding question is which media best shows that climate change needs to be addressed immediately, I have to look at the similarities and differences in order to determine which one is the best. So one of the easiest ways I can do that is with a Venn diagram. So if I'm looking at this Venn diagram and I'm looking at the article and I want to complete, let me get my annotation tools here. I want to complete this Venn diagram to show how they are the same and how they are different. In order to determine which one is the best, I have to take evidence from what I've seen and what I've read. Okay, so we've talked about this before, about looking through our text or our media in this case, because we were watching rather than listening, and taking down information that determines which of these is going to answer my guiding questions. So if we're looking at the video and I'm thinking to myself, what did they both have? They talked about the, big changes in weather. And that's been a really big problem. Okay, that's one way they were the same. Another way they were the same is that that things are going to be getting worse, right? So the climate getting worse. So that helps me to think that both of these would do a really good job about talking about how it's really important. But in the article, I'm going to call this one article. What I'm seeing in the article is that, not much is happening with government. And it seemed like to me that was more of a, let me move that out of the way so we can read it. My pointer. Here it is. Not much is happening. And I get the feeling that this is an American problem. Like this is a problem with the US government. But over here, it's talking about problems around the world. Okay. And when I think about the picture that we first saw, I thought to myself, the images didn't seem that big of a deal because I got to see things like I saw solar panels, and then I saw power plants, but I didn't see things exploding. So here I saw like extreme weather, and I saw the destruction from nature. So if I look at my evidence here, yeah, they both talk about big changes in weather, and they both talk about the climate getting worse. One article just focused on the United States and the government, and they're not doing very much, even though it's really important, and it's very expensive, and it's not good for the economy, versus if we don't do something right now, things are going to be terrible. So if I go back to my guiding questions, and I think to myself, which one is more important in getting the immediacy of doing something about climate change, I think I'm going to pick, maybe I'm going to get the information from the movie trailer, or from the movie, An Inconvenient Truth. Does that make sense? Okay. So let's go back to our presentation. And so I gave you an example of how, if I was going to attack or look at this question, which media best shows that climate change needs to be addressed? And I go back and I analyzed it, I completed my Venn diagram, and I've decided that the movie was better. You all need to be able to do that. If you were given some information, you have to go out there and you have to look at two different types of media, or two types of resources, and be able to answer this guiding question. So what I'm going to do is I have made a list of partners that I'm going to put together, and you are going to work together, and you're going to complete a Venn diagram. This time we're going to look at the space landing, and your guiding question is, which media is best at showing the emotions of being the first person on the moon? And you are going to have a text. And of course, I'll read it to you. And then you're going to have a video, and this is all going to be in your Google Classroom. And you and your partner will go through it, and then we'll do exactly what I did. We're going to look at how they were the same, the text and the video. And then you're going to go through and do your Venn diagram. How are they different? How is the text so much different from the actual footage of landing on the moon? You and your partner are going to answer this question: which media is best at showing the emotions of being the first person on the moon? Okay, so we're going to go through it together. But in this case, we'll take it piece by piece, and you and your partner will work on it together. And finally, ultimately, you will be able to go on and do this on your own with a guiding question. Which media is more effective at conveying, which means showing, what it was like to live during the Great Depression? And you'll be given an article and a song with lyrics to listen to and your Venn diagram. And eventually, on your own, you're going to answer the guiding questions. Which media is most effective at conveying or showing what it's like to live during the Great Depression? Okay, so going back to my interview. So some of the questions you've asked us to do here is, so I've recorded the I do portion, the teacher model portion, and hopefully my video isn't more than 15 minutes. And at the end of that, I will show any resources and talk through how I would guide the students through the redo. So I will try that real quickly. My plan would be that I would read this aloud. This would be for my struggling readers and for my ESL students, and I would read through the text. I would point out the text feature, that this is a script. And when I see McCandless and Armstrong, I have to tell them that's the person who's speaking and these are the words that they say. And I might even mention that this is contrasted with when you see dialogue in a book with the quotation marks. And then they would get a few minutes to talk through this with their partner about what they read. Do they understand what they mean? And then we'll go on and we'll watch this YouTube video on the moon landing. And I'm going to go ahead and include that in the text portion of mine as well. And they'll be able to watch it together. And then I will lead them through it. I'll say, okay, now think about both. What were some of the things that you saw that were in common? And give them a chance to write down some answers. With ESL students or special ed students, they might want to have a chance to rehearse or practice what they're going to say. If you have a really low or struggling student, they may not have their words or vocabulary. So the person that they're working with can help talk them through this and then be able to write down some similarities and differences. And then we can get some input from the students and maybe do a whole class redo. And then students that thought of something that they didn't write could write it down and vice versa. Same with the differences. Give them a chance. Okay, think about what was one difference, what was another difference, and then give them some time to think about it, talk about it, fill out the diagram, and come back whole class, fill it in together, giving students who didn't have an opportunity or didn't see what other students suggested to add that to their Venn diagram. So now they have a complete model, and then eventually we'll go back to that leading question of which one was best at showing the emotions of being the first person on the moon. And then finally, I can determine if if students seem to have a really good grasp at it, or just prefer to work on their own, I can set them to doing the last portion on their own, or I could still have students work in small groups, and students who are still struggling can work with me independently. And this would, of course, build onto the idea that once we get through the idea of which one of these two media would be the best at whatever the guiding question is, to be able to go out and find two and be able to write a paragraph or an essay response supporting their opinion with evidence from the text. But I would probably use these 3 videos again when we get to the writing portion, so that I would put together sentence frames, for example, for my ESL or my special ed or my not proficient students. Like, I think blank is better at describing the Dust Bowl. One reason is, and then come up with their reason from the diagram, and then say because the text says or because the video shows, and I would build those frames and let them finish those sentences. With the third one, they would do on their own if they needed extra practice. Students that are proficient then can go out and pick a topic of their choice. They can find an app, they can find an article, they can find something else, and eventually build on this strategy, this idea of being able to do a search for 2 different media on the same topic and figure out which one's best at conveying whatever the content information is that they're interested in or that they're being tasked to look for. And if I still have students that are struggling, or it would take too much time to determine what 2 topics, I would give them a choice of some sets of different topics. So I could take something from science, I could take something from math, I can take something from popular culture, and I can give them choice. I love to get students choice, something like that. All right, and then it says, how will I ensure that I will be able to get individualized student instruction in the lesson and provide academic feedback in the moment? Well, if it's a live class, then I should be able to pull a student, like if I'm in Zoom or I used Adobe Connect as a learning management system, I can pull them into a private chat and then have a talk with them and then put them back in whole class, or I can check in with them, or I can give them a period of time and then check back in with me and share what their responses are. So hopefully I've done a good job of showing you the I do, a we do, and then they do it on their own. I did not say to actually, I couldn't make a copy of this. I couldn't get I couldn't download a file that my PDF writer could read. I did write it by hand, but it didn't say to attach the lesson plan, but I did indeed fill out all the paperwork for this particular plan. Well, I thank you very much for your time and your consideration. Hopefully I didn't make too many gaffes. Thank you.